la famille.
Good evening. My name's Niket. I'm going to talk a little bit about team and advisors. So what I think was nice about what Daniel kind of brought up is, on one hand, when you're building culture, I think his point was that it's really shown through the actions, and that focus is one of the key areas where you can develop the attitudes and perceptions of what ultimately will define your startup. So before I continue, I kind of want to know what the makeup of the group is. So how many of you have already started a company? Hands up. Okay, and how many of you are thinking about, keep your hands up please, testing you. How many of you are thinking about starting a company? Okay, now everybody who didn't put their hand up, put your hands up. And everyone else put your hands down. This doesn't make sense. That's not possible. This is basic arithmetic. I want to know what the other people are even doing here. They should be having beautiful dinner. Look, it's cleared up. The sky is wonderful. Okay, anyways, let's continue then. All right. So I did a little bit of research today, and I found this number, 30,138.1. If anybody tells me what this number is, I'll give you an A+ for this course right now. Come on, some ideas? It's the pride and joy of French entrepreneurship, and nobody says a word. Come on, somebody. Okay, here we go. Minutes spent in meetings. That is a way underestimate. In the back? Number of startups created. That's interesting. No. Okay, I'll tell you. This is your lifespan, the French average lifespan in days. And that's it. 30,000, which actually turns out was a lot. I was like, oh wow, that's quite a bit, because in America we only have 28,000 days, so you have 3,000 extra days to drink wine and whatever it is you do here. And it turns out that also women have a way longer lifespan in France than the men. So what are you doing to the men, women? Like, I was like, what is going on? And the point why I always show this number is because, we'll come up and we'll talk about things like, you should do a startup. And I'm here to say, no, you shouldn't do a startup. You know why? Because it's really hard, and it's going to waste so many of what is a finite amount of days that you have. So we immediately come into places and we talk about, oh, I want to build an amazing culture. I want to build this thing. And then we forget that you don't even have that many days left. How many of you have completed college? Or basically you're like 22 or 23, right? That's 10,000 days. Now you have 20,000 days left, right? And your last 5,000 days, you're going to be in a diaper waiting to die, right? So you only have like 15 to 20,000 days left. And if you're going to go do a startup and it may take 10 years to figure things out, well, that's a lot of time. That's like 4,000, 5,000 days, and you don't have that many, I'm trying to tell you. So, I think it's really important that should you decide to build something and do it with other people, and just think about this. If you go and spend your life with 10 other people, that's 300,000 days. That's a tremendous amount of time. You should think very deeply about the people you want to be with and the way that you're going to be together and work together for what will be a very intense and expensive duration of a finite resource that you cannot get more of, okay? So let's dive in, and by dive in I mean go forward. Okay, here we go. Startups are hard. I hope this is evident, and everyone says this, and the worst part is, even if I tell you this, you won't realize it until you're deep within it. And a gentleman back from where I'm from named Paul Graham, he says the critical part to startups is trying to be like a cockroach. You want to just simply survive, and that's really the nature of the game. But survival is not a particularly pleasant way of living, right? Survival is very different than thriving. And so, when you build and choose to do things with people, I hope you choose to do it with people that you want to survive with, people that you want to work alongside with under very, very tough conditions. And the top reasons that most startups fail, I have the answer, I think. Yes, I wrote resources and teams, is that most of them just run out of money or resources or time or effort or patience before they figure out something that's worthwhile of value. And also the teams, the people you're with, they tend to actually lead to the highest failure rate as well. Most of the time you get pissed at your co-founder and you're like, I'm out of here. And that's it. And at the end of the day, we talk about company and cultures, but really a company is nothing but a group of individuals, just like this one right here. in many ways, we are our own company right now. So I'll give you an example of a company, and the easiest one to make fun of course, is my own. So back when I was kind of leaving college, I ran into a friend, Reed, and we decided to start a company called Punched. And the three of us founders were actually not particularly good friends. We went to different colleges and found one another inside of the span of a year. But we really clicked, and specifically what made us unique is at the time there was a lot of interest. This is, eons ago, aka 2010. And so there was this kind of idea that the new breed of companies in software would have some capacity to do hardcore engineering. So in this case, it would be software. Design became quite prevalent. Obviously, look at how beautiful this place is and think about what would have happened 10 years ago. And then kind of a person who was willing to do anything else. And that was kind of me, the hustler, if you will. And what we were doing is we were building, how many of you go to coffee shops? If you buy 10 coffees, you get one free, right? So in 2010, we were like, oh yeah, why would I put that in my wallet? There's this gentleman on Seinfeld named George Costanza, and he has like a wallet that's really big. But that just seemed very stupid. So we actually created that on your phone, which doesn't seem like that awesome of an idea today, but back then I had to convince venture capitalists that the smartphone was going to be a big deal. So just to put into perspective, wow, cute, where we were, this was all brand new at the time. It turns out, and then we went through 500 startups, so we kind of did the whole rah accelerator program, and it was fantastic because we met a lot of people who were like us. And through that program, we also were able to recruit people that were also very similar to us. We were mostly just had graduated from college, and we didn't really know much about the world. So we needed to find people who shared our sentiments, our ideas, and our naivety, and also counter that with people who are much smarter than us. And by smarter than us, I mean everyone else, right? Because we didn't know anything. After demo day, that evening, we put on a good show, and a couple of these smarter, older people invested in us, and that was fantastic. And it culminated into a point where we were able to build something that people were using every day. So, we were operating in many countries, we had a lot of businesses set up, and we were using QR codes, which probably seems really lame today, but that was a very useful mechanism, like Bluetooth and like things like this. We're still in by then it was maybe the 2.1 specification, but these things weren't as prevalent as they are today. So we were just using the simplest tools that we could to make something that people wanted. It turns out that another company was very interested in the type of work that we were doing, and my old boss, Marissa, she was very interested in building out tools at Google for small businesses. So, one of the family teams is called You Should. They're working on this kind of stuff today. I was having a chat with them, and it's really actually amazing that we're still working on these problems, just to give you a sense of how big it is. And we were integrated into this thing called Google Wallet, and the reason why you will have never heard of you've heard of Google Wallet, but you've never heard of us, is because we were shut down. So here's this wonderful story. It's yeah, he graduated from college. Oh man, he met some cool people. Oh, he built something. He got money. He got by big Google. I had this beautiful plan to change the world. I was like, nobody will have wallets anymore. You'll walk into a restaurant and the music will change based off of who's in it. All these cool things. And what did I do? I just shut down my own product at Google. So, woo, okay? So what does that mean about entrepreneurship and stuff like that? By all objective measures, people would say that I'm successful. But if you ask me, what do I think that I got out of all of this? What did I really create? Well, it was a clicker that was broken. It was my friendships. It was the team that I built. This is my co-founders. You'll see Reed and Xander. This is at his wedding. Reed and I are best men there, and I was also a groomsman at Reed's wedding. Should any woman be dumb enough to ever marry me, they will be at my wedding. So the reason why I say this is because at the end of the day, we started from this perspective that most startups fail because of the teams and lack of resources, or resources well spent. And so the default case for the majority of us in the room are, well, our idea may not peter out. But then the question is, what exactly is it that we're ultimately doing this for? And I would contend it's to make really, really amazing relationships and create amazing cultures that can persist through our lifetime. You don't really know if the first thing you work on is going to be the thing that you die working on, but it may be. But for most of us, it won't. It'll be the second or the third. Hey, Antoine. Sorry, buddy of mine. Anyways, and so like think about it. I didn't, Daniel walked into Facebook thinking maybe this is a 1-year job. It's interesting. Here's like a web front end that I kind of like just need to like fix because it's trash. And then it turns out now it's just a never-ending project, and they're sending up like planes and stuff into the sky for months and months at a time. You can't bet on that. So what you can bet on is creating groups of people that you really, really love and admire, and cultures that allow for the best work to be produced. So we call these things elite teams, right? And they don't just show up out of nowhere. It's a very, very deliberate process. Okay, second question to engage you. Can anyone tell me who these people are? Not you, Daniel? Not you, Antoine? Yes, sir. What is your name? Say. Okay, Julian? The Google first team, look at that. Extra points to Julian. So that's Google in 1997, 1998, right? You can see my boss, Marissa, there. Larry and Sergey are hidden in there, right? The reason why I show this is that when I was reaching Google, 50% of the first original team, the one I just showed you, was still at Google 15 years later. That company went through enormous transformation. They were worth $0, well, not really zero, and they're a $350 billion market cap company at 2012. Now they're like $580 billion. Just think about that for a moment. Remember my point about 30,000 days? They just committed 15 years of their professional lives, so 20 to 35, in a single endeavor. We should also be so lucky to be able to build something as transformative as Google, but also to build friendships and colleague work relationships that last so long, and especially going through tremendous, tremendous success. Then I went to Flipkart a little while later. I just wanted to put this in there, and I just thought that was funny. Like I said, I haven't been sleeping. And I just want to give you a quick primer on how different it was. So just let me back up for a second. So I'm in a tiny company where there was like 3 co-founders, 6 overall people. So that's very small. Then you go to a place like Google where when I left, there was 120,000 Googlers. And then I went to Flipkart, which is another company that I came in that was a startup and is very big in India. And just to put this in perspective, India is kind of this insano place where there's like 250 million internet users, but only 150 million of them are on smartphones. By 2020, there's going to be 600 million Indians under the age of 24. So if you're under 24 right now, or you're over 24 right now, you might as well be dead. It's over, right? And they had 50 million users. They sell several billions of dollars of merchandise a year. So I was helping my boss run their entire product division. So you're like, oh yeah, you probably were working on a lot of product stuff, right? You were putting together a lot of things to kind of advance the product and make it and push it further. And the answer is yes, but really, actually a lot of it was, it turns out, hiring, HR culture, and our dev process. So how did 75% of my time get caught up in that? Well, it turns out that, when you're building a company, what you are at the very early stages is most likely what you'll look like in the very late stages. You can think of it very similarly as when you're creating a die. For those of you that are familiar with manufacturing, a die is basically a casting of something you're trying to make, and it's the thing that all your injection molds and things come from. So the better the die you make, aka the better your founding team in understanding the values you have and what attributes you look for in one another, will invariably end up manifesting even if you multiply your size by 1,000 or 10,000. And the rate that you grow as a company, so I know some of you that I talk to have a group of 15 already, and you're going to move to 25 or 30 people later this year. You have to realize that your culture is going to be mostly set by the time that those people are there. And afterwards, it's very hard to change it. So that's why I had to spend a tremendous amount of time figuring out how to fix or improve and also double down on certain things that we were seeing at Flipkart, which was a massive company of 33,000. They went through extreme growth. And part of that is because people are very different. You know, I think being here in Europe, you have a unique challenge in terms of your ability to set culture because of the variety of people and their cultures that you encounter. So in the United States, we have tremendous amount of immigrants, but a lot of them acclimate to the way that we are. In Europe, you have basically very dense populations that roam all around, right? With the exception of Britain now. But I was trying to map, you know, it's interesting because, you know, in India, people are emotionally expressive, but they tend to avoid confrontation, whereas Americans, despite me being up here, tend to be kind of emotionally unexpressive and not particularly confrontational. What's interesting is, look at France. They're confrontational and emotionally expressive, you know what I mean? I want to see a French-Israeli company. That would be the most fun thing in the entire planet because it's literally in the top left corner. So when you're building your company, you have to also think about these types of dynamics, right? If you're operating in multiple countries, which is what most of you will end up doing should you become winners in your space, you're going to be hiring from different places. You're going to be working with clients and from different locales. And you need to be extremely thoughtful about how you're changing the way your company works to allow those people to either fit in better or assimilate better, right? And maybe most of you will think, well, I'm just going to service France. There's 70 million people here, or 80 million people, I'm not sure exactly, but that's good enough. But most of the time, it will not be enough in terms of a market segment. So you're going to grow most likely anyway. So you should also think heavily about where do you intend to be and how much do you really know about those other cultures that you're going to start integrating with. Because in software, it's easy, unfortunately, to just say, oh, well, this works here, so I'm just going to put it over there. You know what I mean? Like just add a .fr or a .uk and it's like I'm there. But that's not good enough. That's cheating what I think the real opportunity could be. And building a product ultimately might be easier than building a product company. So the reason why I really stress this is that if you think about your hiring practices, do all the team members you have, do all of them interview? If you're going to interview, do you have a list somewhere of what you're looking for? Or do you just say, yeah, that person felt cool, or we really vibed? You know what I mean? It turns out that that's probably not good enough. You know, the irony is that we will have these decks that we go and present to venture capitalists or angels that say, here's my cohort analysis. Here's the analytics behind my product that I'm building. Here's my 7-day actives, my retention rates. But when it comes to hiring, you're like, oh, I don't even have a job description. That person was just cool. I met him at a cafe. We hit it off. We talked about Elon Musk, and we both love driving cars. Like, that's just not good enough. You know what I mean? This is a person that you have to make a commitment with for a very long time, and you also will be dictating, again, their 30,000 days. And so you should be very deliberate in the way that you build this stuff. Where the hell is it? And like I said at the very beginning, right? What is a company but people? That's it, right? So that means that how good those people are able to operate will dictate how good your product will be. How well those people are respected will dictate what the internal culture and society that you're creating is. It will also create the perception of what people think of you, both as a founder, but also your company. And, you know, and now just to dive into a bit of it, just like some specifics, you know, working on a company is very funny because to me, it reminds me of kind of whenever my physics professors would tell me how planets form. How many of you kind of know how a planet form? Does anyone want to give a shot at telling me how a planet is formed? I know, you guys were like, I was just supposed to show up and listen. This is not my chance to show I'm an idiot. Get used to it. You're in startups. Come on, somebody. There we go, back left. Yeah, partly. What else has to happen? An explosion. Who said that? It just came out of nowhere. It's just like explosion. Okay. Right, like there has to be, so like when you're building a startup at the very early stages, it's kind of funny because there's all this stuff flying around. So what you basically need for planet formation is you need a lot of material. In this case, it would be like space dust and gravity. And as a founder, you are the gravity. And you're flying around all the space dust. One example is look at this place. It's all space dust. There's a bunch of people working on ideas. There's a lot of resources. There's like an explosion over there. And you're trying to yank it all. There's meteors flying around. You can try to catch Daniel, with a telescope real fast. And you're trying to pull it all together. And it seems like utter madness, but it's not so much. And I just want to quickly walk through what the pieces are here. So think about founders. Like, look at these teams. So in the top left, that's, our friends from Seattle, Microsoft. Top right, you have the Google guys. Bottom left, you have kind of Square, Twitter, Medium, YouTube in the middle, and then WhatsApp on the right, bottom right. These people all, for the most part, basically still hang out with each other. They're like stuck with each other. These people are more married than they probably are married to their wives or other partners, whatever it is, as it were. And that's one of the most amazing things, because we normally go into startups thinking that it's a business and that it's very different than our love life. And the first thing I would tell you is that what you're looking at are domesticated couples. And you should be very much thinking about that as you decide what you're going to be working on. It sounds ridiculous, but I really mean it. And it's like you'll get into fights about really stupid things. You'll be like, I'm sleeping on the couch. And he's like, I know, you have your own house. You can sleep wherever you want. You know what I mean? But it's still happening, right? And the co-founders, they really matter. And so this is a photo of me and my co-founders again, years later. We still go back to 500 startups, places like this, where we try to help other people navigate the ambiguity and trouble of building companies. And this is like years later. I'm literally stuck with these people. I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? And one other side note, protect yourself with vesting. Just do it. Just use paperwork. It's very important. The team is also very important. This is actually my friend Albert. He has a company called AppZoom. It's based in Barcelona. And what's amazing about his company is he specifically wanted a multicultural, multilingual, and multinational group. So inside of there they speak 25 languages inside of that group. You can see that he made a concerted effort to find women, both on their tech team and content team. All nationalities are represented. It's like crazy. I would put maps, but I just didn't have time to put all the flags. It was getting kind of crazy. And so, he focused so heavily on building a team that could build for anyone. And what AppZoom does is that they're basically a marketplace for apps. They tell you about apps. And what's really nice is that by having a wide number of people and ideas and perceptions, they're able to give really good reviews that a lot of people from different places could go with. Going back to my whole point about personalization and localization, he basically created that through building a team that literally was that. If you ask me what is the most tremendous thing AppZoom ever did, I won't even talk about the product. I think it's the team. It's incredible. And they were acquired last year, so now they're off doing more things. And the last thing I'll tell you about is advisors. This is another group of people that we don't talk about, that we bring into our lives. Advisors are, we kind of assume this is this person who's really smart or who has this really brand name. But your father or your mother could be an advisor. In fact, for most of your life, they are. And the purpose of an advisor, just to put this into perspective when you're building out your team and your culture, is not to tell you what to do. It's a common mistake. You're like, oh, well, this guy's way smarter than me. He has more credentials, more PhDs, more whatever it is. Trash. It's about a person you really respect that you can have ideas and a discourse with. And their job is to, how many of you have been bowling? This might be an American sport, I'm not sure. It's a very lazy sport. You eat and throw a ball at stuff. It's very, there's you kind of, I don't know, I'll try to explain this through charades. You take a very heavy bowling ball and there's a bunch of things, sticks on the other side, and you kind of caress the ball towards it like that. And you try to hit things. If you're really bad at bowling, there's a second version of bowling called bumper bowling. And it's where on the sides they put this wall up so you can't possibly mess up. And that, I think, is the job of an advisor. Their job is not to tell you what to do. They're supposed to make sure you don't mess up. They keep you out of the gutter, as we would say. And I think that if you take into account these things, like the timing that you have, the people you're going to work with, the people that you surround yourself with, you'll be able to generate a culture through people. And that ultimately is actually what a company is, and that is ultimately what you do, which is, I think, to what Daniel's point was, that to build fast and break stuff wasn't a motto, but an ethos that the people that Mark and his co-founders were able to find many of and put together. And that's why they've created something so remarkable. And so if you have any more questions, I think, Daniel, you should come back up because maybe they have some more questions. I think that you all are lame for not asking many questions. And so I think you should come up with something, even if it's what time zone do you think you're in? Come on. And yeah, I hope that was interesting and useful, and I'll share this out, but I have some resources on things to read in case you don't like to keep listening. So thank you for listening. Okay, so now questions for real though.
What I wanted to know is that how is the startup hub over there, the ecosystem, and what advices could you give, like especially if I want to start something over there, especially since I'm a foreigner and I know that we've lost kind of shitty and a bit difficult for us. So what kind of advices could you give if I want to implement there?
Yeah, okay, so it's a great question. So yes, I kind of like breezed over the fact that I was living in Bangalore for the last 16 months. Bangalore is an amazing place. First of all, India is crazy, literally just crazy. And something to know is that 13% of all startups worldwide start in Bangalore. Yeah, it's actually really amazing. They have one of the most aspirational, ambitious, and creative cultures on the planet. The government and the supporting systems that are in India have not matured in the way that we have it here in the Valley. So companies like The Family that you're part of, these are just beginning in India, especially in terms of what I would call the actual impact power. It's not to say that there aren't people who've built companies there before, but there's a density and infrastructure that's still coming. As a foreigner, one of the interesting things is, and by the way, I was a foreigner too, right? I looked Indian, so everybody was wondering why I didn't know what was going on. You know what I mean? I was like, kind of like, how does this work? What is going on? And also, I don't speak the languages down there like Kannada or Tamil and stuff like that. The first thing I'll tell you is you should absolutely look for talent outside of France only. In the Bay Area, and look at companies like Facebook. Where are some of your like hubs outside of like the U.S., right? Outside of Menlo?
So Menlo, I mean, Buenos Aires, it has a good startup community that's trying to get going. And even in the United States, Silicon Valley is the big hub, and it's migrating to San Francisco, and now Chicago and Boston and New York are all trying to do things. I mean, it's becoming a trend, right? People realize the impact potential, and this is trying to get cloned everywhere. London's trying as well.
So what that means is that the available talent of people that you'll be able to choose from is basically me all over the world. I'll answer your question more specifically one-on-one because I don't know how many of you are interested in the Bangalore startup ecosystem. But in terms of working there as a foreigner, the key thing is, the best advice I was given was try to not come in and run a French company out of India, but try to run a Indian company that happens to service France and almost become like one of them. And it took me a while because it's so hard to acclimate to a place that's so different. But once you do, everything becomes so much easier. We have this word called jugaad, and it means workaround. Like India is all a bunch of jugaads. It's like there's nothing is by the book. Everything is specifically not by the book, and that's why it works. And once you kind of understand that by going local, things start to make a little bit more sense. So yeah. But we can talk more about that, no problem. Endless stories for you. How many of you have a co-founder? Higher up. Like, come on, don't give me this like, yeah. Like, all right. How many of you have more than one co-founder? Right. How many of you are thinking about starting a company know who you're going to start it with? Okay, so just one or two. Now I'm gonna start asking questions to the crowd. The rest of you that are thinking about starting a company, were you planning to do it on your own? Raise your hand. Yeah? Going solo? Okay, I like that. How many of you were going to try to find somebody at an event like this, or maybe from school? Okay. So, how's it going? You tell me.
No, actually it's just that I'm expecting to at some point meet someone. I haven't finished school, so...
You're just going to wake up every day and someone's just going to come they're going to be like, Julian, I was looking for you for years. If Let's start our software company.
But I'm not sure I want to start right now.
Yeah, okay.
So I haven't finished school, so yeah, I still give myself time to find someone that's like fits the right fit at some point.
Perfect. Being patient will serve you very well, because being in a startup, you see all these people, they're always doing stuff. Like you hit up your friend who's in a startup, he's like, dude, we just closed a round, we're running. And you're like, I need to run too. No, you should just chill and be patient,
You said that you create the culture of your startup in the very early days. I vision like a startup is actually evolving a lot during the years, and you might change the pivot after 2 or 3 years, change co-founders. And I was wondering, is there not any possibility that after 2 or 3 years, you have your your business up and running, you have your actual co-founder or co-founders, and you can like now set the culture that you want?
Great question. So think of culture setting as compound interest. The answer is you can, but you're paying interest for not doing it early, right? So the best example I can give you goes back to, if culture is an organism, then the best example I'll give you is basically a baby, right? Within 3 trimesters, or yeah, because there's the 4th trimester, which is always interesting. Anyways, within 3 trimesters, the majority of that baby is made. Brain cells, things like this, right? It's already defined. It's just a matter of getting it out into the open, and then it just grows, right? But most of the fundamental structures are just the same thing, right? So you can think of it in the same way. You absolutely can, 3 years from now, go back and revisit your culture. Most likely, if it's something you don't want, you'll be unable to pay the cost to fix it.
Can I make this personal?
Uh-oh.
Sure.
Here we go.
Look at France, right? Boom! For you, personal.
Hey,
not
I'm
for
a
me.
brown person. You
Sorry.
can't be saying that around me.
But, I mean, there's a lot of complaints about the toxicity of the startup scene here, right? I got a lot of nods earlier when I said regulation slowing you down. Can you change that? Right? There's a lot of people moving in one direction. It's really hard to change the boat. Every country is a little different, a lot of similar processes, but they manifest really differently. It's really hard to change once you're past, I don't know, a dozen, 2 dozen people. Right? Because you set the foundation, you build all the stuff. The products you build are your culture manifested. Right? People at Facebook love to talk a lot, so you get a lot of communication platforms, right? Internal and external, and it all compounds over time.
So assuming that you'll change business models and products over time, you know, because those will be the first years, when you actually start your startup, it's more important to define the culture that you want rather than the product that you want to sell.
It's almost going to be guaranteed that that'll be the case. So one of my earliest investors in Punched, he taught me his order of method in terms of investing was people, market, idea. And in that order, because what he felt was that most ideas fundamentally change, right? Like whatever you start with, you most likely will be building a derivative of it, if not something completely different. And so if you think about it that way, then the key thing is that whatever you're working on has either a market large enough or a market that can be generated that would validate it. But ultimately, it's predicated on the capability of those people. So one of the interesting things that I think you're saying is that somehow your industry or product is somehow indicative of what your team would be like. I would argue it's the other way. You know, if you took a team into a space that wasn't historically cool, and that team was cool, they could make it very cool, right? And we don't look at it that way anymore. You know what I mean? Okay. And that truly is an attitude. Actually, all things considered. You know what I mean? I think right now, one of the examples I'll give you that's pretty fancy, have any of you used Slack? Okay, it seems obvious, but, you know, it's so, you know, look at them, right? Like, at the end of the day, they were building kind of a derivative of what Yammer or Google Talk was, which if I were to ask you, what do you think of those products? You would say, well, they're not that cool. You know what I mean? But here's a group of people that don't make you feel that way. They've decided that work can be quirky and funny, but maybe too connected if you ask me. But yeah, you know? So I think that those people really do make that impact ultimately on what you build. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that some industries, mind you, finance and things like this, very tough. But even now we're starting to see those fragment and fracture.
I would say conversely, if you choose the wrong people, you'll know quickly. Right? It's just not going to work, and that's fine.
Do you see a difference between building a team in-house and the culture and working with them outsourced in remote?
I mean, massively, right? And I don't want to tell you which one to do. I have my preferences, but it's like, would you rather be in the same city as your partner? Or would you rather be in different countries? How's that going to go? Sometimes really well. But you need to know how to work in those types of structures, right? If you're working right next to each other, you're going to be talking and bouncing ideas off each other. You're probably in the same time zone. If you're working with people around the world, maybe they're more affordable. Maybe they're working hours when you're asleep. So for crisis, it's really great. For operations, right? It's great to have people in a lot of different time zones. That way, whenever something goes wrong, there's someone awake. but you have to really improve communication when you're not sitting next to people. You're going to spend way more time thinking about what you're going to say, saying it, and waiting for the response. I mean, even organizing my trip here, it's like you send the message, and then hopefully they have time the next day. Maybe. If not, it's like the next day, and then you have like a couple hours to respond, and then when they wake up again, hopefully get a response. So it just slows things down. If it's worth it, if the impact's there, go for it. Just understand the trade-offs.
So it's interesting, right? Because what you're basically getting at is it's going to influence the style of your company. If in the early days you have a remote team, then you're going to rely on asynchronous communications generally, especially if the time difference is very kind of not convenient. To give you all a real life example, Antoine, who's sitting over here, put your hand up please for me, Antoine. Okay, he started a company with an old friend of mine, Johnny, called Bannerman. They're one of the few French companies that go through YC, and they're based both in San Francisco and France. And they make tremendous sacrifices for one another to make sure that they can have the type of communication required to build what they need to, but that's still not easy. And so they travel back and forth a lot. They try to get the teams together. Daniel was saying, you have to think about what you say. I really hope most people think about what it is they say before they say it. You know what I mean? But the truth is that what will happen is you may inadvertently set a precedent in your culture, which will be that people will tend to operate in a personal interaction. You know what I mean? And all that you have to do is be aware of that and decide whether that's the future of the culture you want, and then deliberately move it into a different direction as necessary. I was talking to the folks from AgroCool today, if you guys know them, and they were talking about how right now they have these happy hours that they have on Fridays, and they're normally at 8:30 at night, and that one of the problems is that people are like, wow, it's 8:30, I gotta get home, wife, kids, Netflix, you know what I mean, and that not many of them are hanging around as much, and I was like, look. The truth is that you're letting that become your culture. You have to be deliberate. You can say, hey, you know what? Happy hour starts at 4:30 on Fridays. So be efficient, be thoughtful about your work, because I want to make sure we have fun and everybody gets home at a decent hour to enjoy their weekend. You know what I mean? It's those types of things that will impact ultimately what happens. I'm not saying don't work late. I'm saying be deliberate about when you should and when you shouldn't, right? Add more thoughtfulness.
I think two more thoughts that struck me. One, if it's across country boundaries, you're going to get some of the diversity that Niket said is super valuable for different perspectives. That's a great plus. Also, GitHub is a company that works mostly remotely, right? Their employees, even if they live in the same place, are usually working from home, from coffee shops, whatever, and they've been incredibly successful given that model. So do what serves you.
I was wondering, through your experience, what's the best theme to let's say not motivate, but to build a nice team. Okay, we know that the co-founders, they have their percentage on the company stocks and stuff. But how do you think that's the most valuable way to integrate the rest of the team as far as it will be the salary, it will be stock options?
I've been thinking about this a lot. I think one of the reasons why you see, and by the way, this is a selection bias, but why you see a lot of young teams these days, even though the average entrepreneur is actually something in their late 30s, is because when you're graduating from college, like we did, for instance, we're all very similar. We have nothing to our names, we have nothing to do, and we all are approximately going through the same life experiences. So when you're building teams, I think a lot about trajectories. You have to pay attention to the trajectory of someone else's life. If someone else is going to have a child or they've just bought a house, these are important anchors in their life. And I use anchors not as a negative term, but specifically how they're grounded. So if you're going to go build a startup where there's no salary and it's going to take a long time and there's fighting with those things, you're going to have a really big problem, right? So you need to be very thoughtful about the conditions and the context in which you build your teams. So the first thing is you can improve your chances. Like, I know what you're saying, because you're saying, how do I get them to join? How do I keep them motivated, right? The first question I would ask you is, how do you align them so that they have the appropriate context in life to even be good for you at all? Because then the motivation and selling part becomes a lot easier, right? Because that becomes more about the story you can sell And yeah, you know, obviously salary and options are fantastic, but look, these are long hours for an idea that may not want to work out. You know, I don't know what the cultural kind of take on failure in France is, but if you're in a place like, for instance, Korea, it's horrible. You would never want to, you know, look at as a failure. You know what I mean? Korea is a place where people work until they die. I'm not joking. And literally, like, someone will just die in their car. And so, you know, it depends. It depends. I think the first thing is think about the trajectory of the people you're going for. And the second thing is if you lead with salary and options, there's probably going to be a disconnect. If they don't believe in you, in the people that you're surrounded with, then I don't see how they're going to be able to agree to wake up every day and spend one of their 30,000 days on something that's so trivial in their mind over a long period of time. Daniel?
And if you're competing on salary, someone with deeper pockets will come along and offer them more money, and then they leave. Right? That's not how you're saying. How do I buy loyalty? You kind of rent it for a little bit, right? This is an integral part of the hiring process. Can we work together? Would I be excited to sit down and talk to these people on a daily basis and work on hard problems with them on a daily basis and just like hate life together, right? When we're trying to survive, is this who I want next to me? And this needs to be part of your hiring practice. And as far as motivation goes, I mean, we're all on trajectories, right? And you kind of overlap with a company for some time, right? We're born, we go to school, we do things. At some point you overlap. And hopefully you overlap pretty well, right? Like 70, 80% of the time. And then you diverge, right? At some point you die, even if it's in your car, and you leave. And hopefully the company, you know, is going a different direction. And you try and maximize that overlap, right? Maybe it's about interest, maybe it's about thinking, what do they want? Where's their career going? Where's their life going? How can I, as a leader, or my company, serve them in achieving what they want? Because if you can give them stuff they want, they'll stay a little longer. You know, and then at some point we all leave, and that's got to be okay.
One thing I learned from a CEO of a company, I forget the exact name, but they work on mindfulness. He always said that he focused on trying to advance each person he hired personally. So you'd always ask them, what's one thing that I can do to advance a very important thing to you in your life? And it generally was non-work related, like someone who wanted to meet somebody or someone who wanted to write a book. He would like hire like a writing coach. It was actually really tremendous. It's amazing. At the most quintessential level, he was investing in his people, and they loved him for it. And as a result, there was tremendous motivation to remain with him. And they've become, I think it's Mind Body, I'm not sure, but they've become very successful as a result. Very positive, very awesome culture.
Okay, so with my team, my co-founders is from India, France, and America. What do you think, as we're trying to create our culture and we're so different, what are the things that we should focus on? And what tonight I'll be drafting my company's culture book. What are the most important things that I should focus on explicitly as I try to envision our culture together?
Are they all natives of the place that they're at?
Yes.
Empathy, right? Like, if there's anything you can improve, it's learning as much as you can about them, how they grew up, what their life was like, and things like this, right? Because at the end of the day, you're in a working relationship, and the only way to respect someone else is to generate compassion. The Dalai Lama has a quote about this. He says that all humans can fundamentally connect on a singular premise for compassion. Number one, that every human has a right to not want to suffer, and number two, that you have the right not want to suffer. So therefore, on that, you can basically bridge any gap, no matter what it is, right?
Only because suffering is inevitable.
Yeah, that's true. One of the funny things is, like, I'm just thinking about your group. You're saying you have an Indian and an American and a French person. So it's like this like little crazy triangle of like people who basically don't like confrontation to people who like it and people who mostly show emotion, though. So, you know, like, is there anyone else on the team? How big is the team? Is it just you three?
Yes, we have someone from Cameroon.
Okay. This is amazing. This is like beating my other company. I'm gonna have to put your guys' photo up on
Yeah,
this now.
that's, I mean, and we're all so different, and it's like a social experiment. I call it social engineering. That's what I said. That's what I call myself.
I
But
like that.
what is as a social engineer, I'm like, and some of us, we haven't met one of our co-founders, but he's the most reliable, most amazing person, and it's the guy from India.
So, practically speaking, I think this is just, first of all, irrespective of what happens, this is an amazing opportunity to learn about other cultures that most people will never even be able to do. You know, if you guys aren't doing like a weekly choose where you're from and let's have that cuisine and talk about it, then you should. ASAP. You know what I mean? That's amazing because, again, if you can generate empathy amongst yourselves, then you'll be able to understand how you think, what your belief systems are, and then as you work through problems together, you'll understand how to work with the other people. So you'll know what their characteristics are. You kind of already understand that one person's highly reliable, so you know what kind of tasks to also send on to people. You know what I mean? I honestly think that at the end of the day, taking time to, one of the things is that there is something to be said, just mind you, about homogeneity. Like there is a positive attribute to that, which is that it's less work if all of you are very similar to quickly align. You know what I mean? So if you aren't very similar, then you actually have to put in an extraordinary amount of effort to become similar, or at least align, right? Whatever that ultimately means. And so you should double down on that because most likely, like I said earlier, teams fracture, right? That's the reason why things fail. You're gonna have to figure out how to get past that and move quickly, even though you all think very differently. That's useful as a larger company, but at the early throes of a company, you need to move fast. You don't have time.
I would say get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. Right? We all have them anyway. The difference between your teammates might be bigger, but if you have a different collection of people with a lot more diversity, you're going to be able to tackle a larger diversity of problems. Okay. But that doesn't mean every individual can tackle more. It means as a collective. So maybe there's one guy who's really good at UI. There's one guy that's good at this. There's one guy that's good at, languages. And obviously this turns into departments at a company or different roles in a company. But as individuals at a flat, very small company, they're still going to have strengths and weaknesses. So as a leader, your job is to figure out what those are and then put people in the right spot to crush it. I've managed really diverse teams. It's tricky and also incredibly rewarding. And you run into like really funny cultural problems that you're like, wait, we have to talk about this? And it's awkward, but it actually makes you a lot richer as a human because you're dealing with human problems beyond the technical stuff. And that's all culture.
At what moment you felt like I should not work for the company, I should make my own startup or something like that? Like, I know it depends upon the individual, but still, like, what was that moment like when you said, like, man, it's enough. I'm going to make my own startup?
You'll know.
Yeah. So luckily, I had that decision made for me. I when I was graduating college, I graduated in the wonderful 2009 tech boom, and by that I mean that the markets fell out. I was gonna try to go be a quant in New York. Turns out those people were responsible for that, so I was like, can't do that anymore. And in many ways, I found myself in San Francisco by chance. My recommendation to you is, what I tell people who are often at jobs and they say, I don't like my job, is the things I look for are, if it's not fun and you're not learning, then those two things will at least tell you that you should perhaps try to change something dramatically. Whether that's to start a company, that's a very different and personal question because, to be honest, starting a company sucks. It takes so much from you. You know what I mean? It's not like a job where you can check in and check out. It's a deeply, deeply personal thing. So I don't know if I want to answer that for you, but you'll know when you're ready to do it. But my recommendation is think a lot more before you decide to do it. You know what I mean? Don't jump in unprepared, eyes wide open, That's what I would say.
Yeah, there's a really big difference between leaving a job and starting a company. You can be forced to leave jobs. You can get bored at your jobs, which is generally why people leave. They're either bored or they don't like their boss. Those are two big ones. And, you diverge eventually. Or you burn out at a startup. Startups take a lot from you and don't really give much back for years to come. So maybe that's you gave what you could, and it's time to move on.
It was like a hard move for you to make it, like you said, like, okay, like this is the moment I should do now, or like it was harder for you to make the decision?
I can't answer your insecurity around starting a startup. You're going to have to contend with that on your own, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, leaving Facebook was an incredibly challenging decision for me to make. And look, my mom was just like, why are you leaving this amazing job? And a lot of other people are just like, why are you leaving this amazing job? You know, like, I'm like, okay, guys, it's been years. I told you this was a big deal, and what, now you believe me? You know, this is startups, right? But I knew for a while that I was just kind of less happy and a little less engaged, and like I had been so engaged and so excited for so many years that the difference was big. And I didn't want to be a part of something that I wasn't really excited about. So I left to go find something that I was really excited about. And first it was like dancing and yoga, which was fantastic, because that really took it down a notch from what I was doing before. And then I would
say they took it up a notch.
It did take it up a notch. And then I started to ask those questions: what do I want to do next? I started interviewing a little bit, tasting. It doesn't taste so good. That doesn't taste so good. Oh, this is more exciting. And I kind of flirted with startups for a while, and then a friend said, hey, I'm starting something up. Do you want in? And I was like, yes. Serial entrepreneur, really smart guy. I've known him for years. Actually, I came to Paris with him. And a couple of other friends who were all very smart, were like, I'm in, right? It didn't work out, but that's a different story. So then you have the forced retirement onto something else. But, just follow your nose. And you got to trust your instincts. If you get excited about something, go for it. And then fail fast.
You only have 30,000 days, and then you die. If that doesn't make that clear. And most of you are not starting at 30,000 right now. You're already down a lot, so.
Also for that one, I'd recommend fail fast. It's way less painful.
Yeah, that's true.
Hello.
Hello.
You were kind of joking about this earlier, but what would be your recommendation for finding a co-founder, since it's such a big piece of the puzzle?
Like, do you mean practically speaking, or how do you kind of like literally where would you find a co-founder, or do you mean like how do I assess a potential co-founder?
Well, probably both.
It's like where do you meet people? I was like, oh well, we got internet services for this now, and then people are like, oh, dude, I'm not marrying someone off the internet. You can go to bars, you can go to the park. You got to do you.
It's funny, right? Because the way I met my co-founders, we were on a double date together. So we didn't know each other. So the two girls knew each other, and then we ended up just leaving them. We're like, these chicks suck. It's a true story.
I think they left you.
Yeah, definitely. I don't blame them. Smart decision. Anyways, who's laughing now? Anyways, but them still. But I think... So there's a trajectory question that I always bring up, right? So it's like, when you say you have to find a co-founder, they have to be able to understand at some level at least what you're going through, right? It's not about age. It's about like maturity and kind of position and context in life. And so without getting too specific, I would really focus on those ideas, because what that'll do is you'll know I shouldn't be going to a club to find a co-founder, you know what I mean? Just like you should, like it's hard to find like a spouse at a club, you know what I mean? It's a very interesting relationship that you're going to start, in such a way. So one of the things that I find that people do really well is they go to school, they go back to school, graduate school, things like this. Obviously, if you finish your undergraduate, that is right. I think things like the family are super interesting. Again, this didn't exist, right? Like normally you'd have to stumble across these people. Here, they've kind of created an area for people to stumble over one another. Depending on the area of interest you have, I would also, I think that the power of communities, if you go look at companies like Reddit, do any of you use this? Reddit, everybody should. What's happening is that you're connected to a lot of people who have similar interests. So that's kind of what Reddit is. It's community-based interests, right? And you're just trying to find that, because someone who at least starting there will help you narrow down what is an enormous field of people that probably want to work alongside you. If you guys decide to go like start a company with your best friend, it's a very dangerous proposition. You have to know that you're willing to go through hell and know that friendship must persist irrespective of what you put it through. I've seen a lot of friendships just absolutely be destroyed. Relationships I thought weren't possible to be destroyed were destroyed by starting companies. So you should think also very deeply about that if you decide to engage some of your closer friends.
Like, start digging into it, start reading, start figuring out who are the knowledge leaders, start coding, start putting stuff out there, because you may bump into people who are going to be aligned with you, that some of them maybe you'll like, and some of them will bump into you when you have something out there.
That's actually a great point. One of my friends who was working with us at Punch, Nat, he had a great job. He was going to a company called GitHub. There was like 20 people there, and I kept hitting him up, and I was like, "You need to come work with us. This is way cooler. Screw your Git trash, whatever it is that you're trying to build over there." And then like eventually what I think sold him was I showed him what I was building, like my actual own code, and he was like, "This is so bad, I'm going to join just to fix all the crap that you wrote." And so I was like, perfect, like, you know what I mean? Later I was like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't realize GitHub was going to be..." Anyways.
I'd like this guy.
Yeah, Nat's amazing. If you're watching this on YouTube, Nat, I love you. Anyways.
Sorry
and
about
thanks,
that.
and sorry.
Sorry.
But not sorry.
So what was you guys' biggest challenge you had to face working with a team, like a specific event separately?
Sounds like an interview question. I'm like, what company am I joining after this?
Tell us about your biggest
This
failure.
is why I think I like computers, right? Because if I put 1, 2, 3 into a computer, I get 1, 2, 3 out, or it's some sort of compiling error that's my own fault. But with humans, you put in 1, 2, 3, and you get like AZ boop out, and you're like, what just happened? With humans, right? So,
and you can't A/B test them.
Not
They
easily.
really don't.
They don't
like
like it. They revolt actually when you do. Right, like dating, right? You're like you have like 3 tables set up, and you're sitting at each one for 5 minutes.
Yeah, you
They don't
basically
like
get
that.
one choice, and that's it.
What is the hardest thing?
So I woke up one Saturday morning, and I'm lying in bed, groggy, with my email, laptop on my stomach, as any good startup engineer is, and I see this email, VP of Engineering, addressed to me. I'm like, what? Will you please go to Ireland and start an international training program for the company? Like a one-liner. And I'm like, maybe? I'm like, okay. What are the challenges here? Oh, I like this challenge. Okay, sure, let's go for it. And I looked at Ireland on a map, and I was like, I'm in. Lots of questions, but sure. So a month or two later, I'm in Ireland. There's like some random sysadmin, there's a DB guy, and there's like a platform guy. And then there's marketing, sales ops, and of course all the tax people. And my challenge was kind of double. One, there were 80 engineers that were landing in the next 6 to 8 weeks, up from zero, like me and my buddy who flew out there. And also, I wasn't on my home turf. I was in Ireland, and so I ran into a lot of the cultural things. Now, look, they speak English, and they're excellent people. I love their culture.
You call that English?
The young people, definitely. But so I started looking at charts like this one, actually, at Hofstede's cultural dimensions is a great thing to look at. And I was talking to HR people, and I'm like, okay, I have all these people. What should I expect? And then, of course, you can't really plan it, so you just show up, and you're like, okay, the housing sucks. Literally, they put us next to the projects, and it was like across town. I'm like, okay, deal with that. Because, look, if people are worried about their housing, they're not going to be focused on work. So like, okay, fix that. And of course, you're talking to Menlo Park, California. Okay, let's be honest, it's like, shoot the email and wait till the next day. And then you're like, oh, never mind, it's not fast, I'm dealing with it myself. So you like hunt down some people in the office and you try and make it happen. And you run into the culture barriers again. Then people start coming, you start seeing the problems. Okay, I'm leading, but some people are confrontational and some people are not confrontational. We did an offsite. I'm like, let's do some team bonding, get to know each other, right? And we're doing some group challenge. We have to get all the people through this contraption. And I'm like, sure, send me first. They shoot me through, and then I watch. Right, my team works together, and we only had to get like 4 out of the 5 people through. And so who's the last? Like, if you have to guess, what ethnicity was the last guy? Non-confrontational, less emotional, willing to sacrifice for the team. Right? I don't want to grossly stereotype, but like Asian. And I stood there talking to the leader of the group. I was like, why do we only have to get 4 of the 5 people through? Because you play to people's cultural stances. It was like perfect that I saw culture happening and how it would play out. And like, look, we won the challenge. Great, focus on the impact. And realize that the people you work with will function totally different. And if you're okay with 4 of the 5 people making it through, great. If you're okay with an all-male, all 20-somethings work group, great. And if you're not, like Niket said earlier, you have to work really hard to understand who people are and how to get them to work together.
I think the hardest thing for me was my interpersonal relationships. I turned into an asshole. And it's possible that actually I just shed my coat and I was just an asshole inside. I didn't know. But one of the challenges with starting a company is the type of stresses that you go through. It really put you on edge and stress. And I had roommates. So for instance, they got a lot of the backlash from being in a situation where I didn't have any money. I couldn't enjoy the types of things that everyone in my age group were doing, you know? One of the things I don't think that we talk enough about, and I think this is what's so interesting about the family here and others, things like this, is that it's really hard what you're going through, and it's isolating in nature. So even, I in retrospect, I wish I had more thoughtfulness, and I'm very proud of Xander and Reed, who both got married to the women that they were dating at the time. I can't imagine how much stress was put on that relationship in retrospect. If you're currently in a relationship and you're going to go through this, it would behoove you to really set expectations and do stuff. I'm working with a friend who's she was dating a startup founder, and she kind of told me all the troubles of it, you know what I mean, and trying to get that out there. So one of the things I'll tell you is that you should try to find a community. You should do 2 things. You should really pay attention to the fact that your interpersonal relationships with your family, your friends, and your significant other will suffer when you're in a startup. And you should do what you can to offset as much of that as possible. You truly will never be able to do it all, but you can at least learn from mistakes from other people. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I would say was the hardest thing. And luckily, most of mine remained intact, but mostly because the other people were much better than I was.
Hello. Well, my question is mainly about failure, because you kept on saying that many startups fail. And that's a fact. I totally agree.
Sorry to discourage you.
Yeah, but my question is, since you're already starting up a startup, how can you prevent a failure? I mean, how does it happen, Because you've been through that and you know exactly what happened. Were you able to predict it in order to maybe find solutions in order to avoid it? Or it just happened, you wasn't really expecting it? And thank you.
Sure. If I knew how to prevent failure, just so I can caveat anything I say, I'd probably be a much more tenured and respectable entrepreneur. But what I would say is, actually Daniel kind of made this point. What I really see in most startups that fails ultimately is that they simply just don't build stuff that people want, right? So this is something that the YC, Y Combinator culture is really, I think, nailed on the head, which is all you should really focus on is building something, talking to your customers, and then making sure you are healthy enough to then to take another iteration, right? There's no guaranteed way to not fail. And I would also contend, and I think part of the story I was trying to tell was that if your only definition of success is for some sort of liquidity outcome, like an IPO or an acquisition, then I would really press you to think about the other things that you could do, right? Like Mother Teresa was probably happy helping one person in addition to the 10,000 and 10 million after that, right? She was completely fine with one. And it was because she was okay with that she was able to do the rest of the work. And now she's going to be gone and made a saint, right? So I think that in terms of reducing failure, I would say the following things. Focus is imperative. A lot of people say they want to do a startup, but they do not have the drive. You need to have tremendous tenacity. Intelligence is almost secondary. There's a certain amount of intelligence that matters. After that, it doesn't matter. The remainder is effort. And like they say, 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration, right? And so I think that most people fail because they don't actually put in what I would call a qualified effort to earn a non-failure outcome. The second thing is expectation management and ego setting. The expectation of being wrong and being educated will allow you to open up yourself to opportunities and pathways that more arrogant and less thoughtful people will not be able to have. And those tend to lead you down very good paths. And the third one is rejuvenation and persistence. You have to find a way to remain engaged. That means like figuring out whatever it is that keeps you alive, wealthy, healthy, and fundamentally sound in your thinking. So whether that's yoga and dancing or something else, or your family, right? Don't discard those so easily because you think that being at a meetup at the family is important at 8:30 at night on a Thursday.
Yeah, if you're not happy and healthy yourself, how can you help other people be happy or healthy? If you're not productive yourself, how could you help them be productive? I mean, like Niket said, if you can predict failure, you won't fail. So failure is what you didn't expect. And sometimes it's because like, look, I made a false assumption. There was this great market here. It's a market opportunity. It's small, but it's growing. Don't worry. Maybe the market never grows. You're out of luck. Like, bad assumption. Try and minimize the number of assumptions, right? Like, as an investor or as a founder, interviewing other people, other like startups that you could join, how many assumptions are they making? How many Hail Marys or like, you know, amazing victories do you have to succeed? You want like 0 or 1, right? Okay, if we can only do this, this is the one miracle that I think I have some ideas on how to solve. Everything else, we just lay it out. I can describe all the solutions and for how we're gonna scale and how we're gonna hire the team and how we're gonna monetize in this, right? Maybe you get one miracle out of it. And sometimes you will luck out and sometimes you don't. The other stuff is just, yeah, be resilient. Get the feedback when you need it, both at a personal level and a corporate level. Be receptive to it. It's kind of this weird balancing act because you don't want to be too arrogant, you don't want to be too insecure. There's bad things on both sides. And you know, you and your team need to figure out, is this feedback legitimate? Should we switch directions? And then you need to realize when maybe the game's up. Willpower alone is not enough to fuel your startup. At some point, it's test of reality. Do other people like it? Am I adding value to other people? Are they willing to pay me for that value? And you'll figure that out. And it'll get easier over time. Your first couple failures suck. And you're like, oh, that took me forever. And then, you know, it gets slightly less painful and slightly faster. You're like, yeah, I see the dead end. Let's be done.
Well, thank you for coming, seriously.
Que la famille.